It's been said that the press has become the enemy of the people, and for good reason. It's heavily financed through a steady stream of corporate money. Journalists have been replaced with highly paid, dim-witted plastic puppets whose only real skill is to read the words as they scroll the teleprompter. Certain alphabet agencies and separate corporate entities have essentially co-opted the media, turning it into the most distrusted source of information. However, I would have to say the biggest threat to America is the college campus. They have been turned into literal indoctrination centers where young, pliable minds are taught to loathe America and to view socialism and communism as the only path to a social utopia. This weaponization is a fact. But I want to delve into how and why this complete ideological 180 has occurred. Because Americans cannot be bludgeoned over the head with any sort of sudden and disruptive change, it makes us the most susceptible citizenry on the planet to incrementalism. And this allows me a nice segue to humbly, I might add, to throw my penny into the theoretical bucket as to how a mind can become so vulnerable to programming and indoctrination. To the 15 people that watch this, if one of you can leave a comment and fact check me on this, I think it was sometime in the mid-60s and definitely into the early 70s, the social engineers that were already firmly embedded within academia began to implement changes in the ideas and methods surrounding child rearing. No more tough love because, as we've come to find out, it creates what is now referred to as toxic masculinity. This was reinforced by the idea of getting in touch with your child's emotions and feelings, allowing them an environment to freely express both, the idea being that this will improve the child's development. The age-old notion that the child should be seen and not heard, an idea that simply means children should demonstrate respect, was, as a result of these new theories of child rearing, inverted into an archaic and almost abusive method of parenting. So this is step one. Introduce a behavioral modification. Step two is to begin to change what we think and, more importantly, how we think. It wasn't that long ago that we used to ask each other or be asked, hey man, what do you think about the Trilateral Commission? Or what do you think about forced vaccinations? In order to respond, you'd have to not only know what you think, you'd have to begin to imagine and organize the language necessary to, in a coherent fashion, convey what it is you think. In other words, when asked what one thinks, the brain is working at a higher functioning or upper brain capacity, which simply means there are more areas of the brain engaged during the thinking process. However, as the new theories of child rearing mandated, we began to ask, how does this or that make you feel? In fact, the idea was reinforced en masse via the Mary Tyler Moore Show, as well as Bob Newhart and Family Ties, etc. The question of how something makes you feel literally became a national punchline for a handful of years. When asked what one feels, now you begin to deal with the lower functioning or reptilian aspect of the brain, which is steeped purely in emotionalism and irrational behavior. If you've watched any sort of the man on the street interviews or seen any of the footage of the confrontations, you see evidence of this, that the neo-progressive stance is nothing more than an emotional gesture to lunacy. At these rallies that sometimes turn violent, they will scream at you, spit on you, maybe even hit you with a bike lock, all, of course, while never wanting to reveal their faces. But ask any one of them what they think about the Federal Reserve stranglehold on America's money supply, or why the skies are being sprayed with aluminum silicate, barium and strontium by the tens of thousands of pounds per day, and you get a vacant stare, quickly followed by a middle finger, and then they walk away. Because they do not have the capacity to intellectualize their thoughts, because since childhood they have been taught and raised to deal primarily on an emotional level, because that's where the most rewards come from, which is exactly why we see many of this generation, namely Jussie Smollet and the several dozen before him, actually seeking to be a victim, real or imagined. This brings us to step 3. Begin to unleash these neo-progressives into the public sphere and ensure that they get to be the superintendents of schools, teachers in your classrooms, sheriffs, mayors, and city council members of your town. They will be the next wave of lawyers and judges and magistrates and politicians. If you think Ocasio-Cortez is something to behold, just wait. Which is exactly why I maintain it's the university and colleges of America that are its biggest threat. Or are they? 2/3 of them can't even look at a map and point to North America. Because they grew up with social media, both their thoughts and language have become hyphenated. One of the main reasons social media was released to everyone, everywhere, all at once, was to create a thought process relegated to the here and now, which further reinforces the emotional response and coddling this generation requires. And besides, most of them don't even know how to change a fucking light bulb. So how worried should we really be? Unfortunately, this is a relatively simplistic overview of what is a much larger story that needs to be told. This ideological 180 took almost 5 generations to finally come full circle, and I think the results exceeded even their expectations. What you've been reading throughout my jibber-jabber are excerpts from a book that in future videos I'll be reading from in its entirety. I feel that for many of you, this will fill in so many analytical blind spots. Most of you are really good at the who and the when and the where, and a lot of you are really good at the how, but too many have forgotten to ask the most important question of all, why? As kids, that's all we used to give a shit about. Why is the sun yellow? Or the sky blue or the grass green? Why does a zebra have stripes? Why is a banana curved? I suppose that's the true test as to whether or not one has lost their inner child, right? Quit asking why, and the inner child will die. Anyway, this is an important book that is based on the conclusions the Reese Committee of 1952 through 1954 came to, and I will undoubtedly answer the questions as to how and why the College and University of America is the true enemy of the people. Like, share, subscribe, but more importantly, know thy enemy.